Good morning, beautiful people of Big Dog Nation, Wolfpack. Hello, welcome everybody to your favorite show, Market Watch Mondays. I am your host, Mike, aka at Mike Me Up with 2Ps on Twitter. Head on over there and follow me if you can. If you're new to the channel, just scroll down a little bit, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications, and hit the like if you enjoyed the video later after you watch it. It helps me more than you know. Welcome to the channel if you're new. If you're one of the OGs, man, welcome back. You guys know what time it is, man. It's time to hit that intro. All right, so I'm recording this morning on Saturday because I'm about to hit a flight out back to Canada to visit my parents. Your boy I've not seen my parents since before COVID started, so it's been a long time. So I'm really looking forward to that. You know, finally getting to see La Familia. You know, I'm trying to get my gangster talk on now that I've been watching Narcos Mexico. By the way, if you haven't watched the new season of Narcos Mexico, get on that. I have one episode left. The show is fantastic, man. I don't know how long they're going to keep running for. I hope they keep running it for a long time because it's a great show. But anyways, enough about that. This is going to be a short video today because I just want to cover one topic, one very overarching theme, and I don't even know if it's strategy, but just like the way I think about things. As you guys know, this is mostly a Dynasty strategy channel. We don't do too many player breakdowns here. We might do more and more of that in the future, but for this show itself, I want to just teach you guys the way I think, right? And hopefully that helps you think, and that helps you become an even better player than me. You know, if you guys are part of the Patreon, you guys know what we're all about in that business there. A lot of smart guys in there, a lot of smart folks. If you're not part of the Patreon, make sure you head on over, join patreon.com/ourpack. That's patreon.com/ourpack. Link is in the description below as well. But a lot of like-minded Dynasty gamers, very strategic thinkers. You know, I love hopping in there, chatting it up, chopping it up with the homies every once in a while. It's a great group of guys in there. Hopefully get some femmes in there, you know, sooner rather than later. But for now, you know, it's a great group of guys. You know, we talk about everything Dynasty related, so make sure you get on over there and check us out. But today's topic of discussion, right, is market value, right? How do we think about it, and how do we think about it in the context of rankings, right? In one of the prior episodes, I talked a little bit about how you don't want to be too far ahead of your skis, right? I'm personally never really that concerned with being first, right? Because being first is nice to like brag on Twitter and, you know, take your victory laps and all that. But when it comes to winning the game, right, being first is not always the best thing. Because in order to be first, you got to take a lot of risk, right? And what that means is if you're first on some guys and you hit, there's probably a slew of other guys that you were first on that missed, right? So it's kind of like playing the risk management game. That's why I'm okay with not being first on guys. I'm okay with being more in line with the market, but just being a couple steps ahead, right? That's how I've played the game. I played the game by saying, okay, this is what the market thinks. Even though I think this player is way better than what the market thinks, I don't want to be too far ahead of my skis, right? And that's how I build my ranks. And that's how I think people should use their ranks, right? I think, you know, right now how people approach and think about a ranking set is, let me just rank the players like from best to worst exactly as I think about them, right? That's not how I think you should do it. That's more importantly, that's not how I do it. If you guys are in my Patreon ranks, like, you'll see that I'm ahead on certain guys, and I'm talking mostly in the top 50 to 100 players. Like, once you get to, like, you know, 150, 200, who cares, man? Go wild. Be ahead of the market because there's no risk there. But what I'm talking about is, like, you'll rarely find me ranking someone in, like, you know, my top 50 players if they're outside of the top 100 on ADP, right? Because I'm always tracking ADP. I'm always getting a pulse on the market. I'm always getting a pulse on trade value. And this is how I approach it. It might not be perfect, but this is what I do when I'm doing my ranks is I say, okay, well, this is where the market is. How far ahead and how far behind do I want to be? Because I want to place it so that if you're using my ranks, you're far ahead enough to land that player and still have upside for value. And at the same time, if I'm far behind, you're like far behind enough where, you know, if they fall enough and they de-risk themselves, it's still a valuable pick, right? And that's how I think rankings should be built. That's not how I think rankings are built across the board, right? If you look at across the industry, people are just building their ranks, you know, very kind of like, hey, this is what I think. And And the reason why I don't do that is because I don't have that much confidence in my ability to player eval people, right? I don't think anyone should have that much confidence in their ability to evaluate a player because it's a fucking tough game, man. It is a really tough thing to do. NFL teams spend millions and millions and millions of dollars every year, and they still get it wrong, right? And we're using their data to layer on top of that using analytics. Like, people think about analytics as like, hey, like, we're just off doing our own thing. Like, no, like, the analytics, a big part of analytics, taking in draft capital. What is draft capital? That's all the film evaluation, all the coaching, scouting that NFL teams did, right? We're still relying on that and building on top of it. So in that same manner, I like to rely on the market value and then build on top of it, right? I don't like to just like start freaking, start willy-nilly and just put like Michael Pittman as a top 5 wide receiver because I like him, right? And you'll see people do that a lot. And the reason why I don't like doing that is because of the risk management ratio, right? The risk reward. If I'm too far ahead of the market, all I have is downside, right? And a good example of that, it would be like DeAndre Swift. Like, I thought DeAndre Swift was a top 5 dynasty running back, or top 3 dynasty running back, maybe even coming into the year. But nobody valued him as such, right? He was going mostly in like the 3rd round, end of the 2nd, early 3rd round. So there's no reason for me to rank him too highly. So what I did is I make an adjustment. I had him ranked towards that, like, beginning of the 2nd, middle of the 2nd, and then slowly inched him up and up as the market caught up. And the benefit of doing that is, like, in the sense that it worked out. I had a lot of DeAndre Swift exposure, both in like best ball and whatever. But I was ahead enough, right? The rankings, if you went off my rankings in the offseason, you would have drafted a lot of DeAndre Swift, right? But you wouldn't have drafted him at his ceiling, because now his ceiling is like top 3, top 4, like dynasty running back, right? That's where everyone has him in the 1st round now. It's like a foregone conclusion. So I think that's like the key is, like, I could have ranked him in the 1st round, right? Like in the middle of the 1st round where I thought he should be right off the bat, but I didn't, because if I did that and I was wrong, you're totally screwed, right? There's no risk management there. That's why I think, like, I think about like the ADP or whatever you use to judge market. Like, I use a mix of ADP. I use paid ADP from FF Engineer. Shout out to him. I use trades in my own leagues to try and gauge temperature, because, like, I think there's no better data point than actual, like, practice and drafts. So I use my real live drafts that real money drafts that I play in. I use trades that I've done. I look at trade calculators as well. So I put it all together to try and get a pulse on what I think the market is. And it's not a science, right? It's more of an art, much like everything in fantasy football. But I think it's a good starting point. And that forms, like, if you guys have ever seen Loki, the show, right? That forms my sacred timeline, right? So that's like the middle of the sacred timeline. And my rankings will always float, between a certain band between the highs and lows of the sacred timeline. I don't want to branch off into a bunch of different, like, offshoot timelines. That's not what I want. I don't want chaos, right? I want to be like the dude, the keeper of time in the show. It keeps it all smooth, right? And the reason why I like to do that is because, honestly, the market is pretty good at predicting, like, value, right? If you look at off-season ADP to in-season ADP versus, like, the first 4 weeks of the season versus the rest of the season, great Adam Harstad on Twitter did a great study on that, and it shows, like, ADP is pretty damn good, right? And a lot of people, to be honest with you, if you just drafted the ADP, you probably do better. Like, a lot of people do better than they actually do in fantasy. But everyone wants to outsmart themselves. Everyone wants to be first. Everyone cares about being the guy. You get on Twitter, what do you see? Like, man, I was pounding the table for DeAndre Swift, and someone else coming like, no, I was pounding the table harder, and then everyone's like, no, I was pounding the table. But, like, who cares, right? I care about winning the game. That is all I care about. That's all my content is. Everything I do in my content is tailored towards winning the game. I don't care about clicks. I don't care about views. I care about winning the game, because I'm a player first, content creator second. To be honest with you, that's how it is. If I didn't like playing this game, and I wasn't a winning player, you wouldn't see me making content. That's just the bottom line. But I'm a winning player, and I want to share that knowledge with you, so that's where I come from. So I come from practice, and to me, when you deviate too far from the median path, which is the market path, you set yourself up for asymmetric risk reward, which is more pushed towards the risk side, less toward the reward side. And that's not what you want. In Dynasty, I'm all about taking advantage of asymmetric risk rewards, where the reward is greater than the risk, right? Once that balance shifts towards the risk side, I'm out on that strategy. And that's why you'll rarely see me be the first to put a rookie wide receiver as Dynasty wide receiver 1. Why did it take me so long to move Jamar Chase into that first tier? Because I wanted to see the data first, right? I want to see more data points, and I didn't need to be first, right? If he was good, he's going to prove out to be good. That's totally fine. But I don't need to be first. There's no advantage to be the first one that said, I put Jamar Chase as the wide receiver one. Who cares? Who cares, man? I'm not here for a fucking popularity contest. I'm here to win games and win money. That's what it's all about. I'm here to win games, win money, and get that goddamn bread, all right? And anything else that acts counteract to that, I don't care. So in that regard, so when you think about building your own rankings, a lot of you guys out there ask me, like, how do you go about building ranks? I would start with ADP. Start with an ADP set you trust, and then shift up and down depending on what you see, right? And that's how I first started doing rankings. Now that I've been in this game for so long, when I built the new ranking sets for the Patreon members, I literally just went player by player. I had a list of players, and I would just slot them in. And then the second part of the check, though, is I go to ADP and I see, hey, where am I really far off, right? If I'm off by 2 rounds, especially in the top part of the draft, I'm going to shift my ranks quite a bit. So, and it's not like 100% blanket statement, but for the most part, if I see I'm outliering somewhere, I'm going to move that needle back more towards the middle, but just enough ahead in order for you to land that player, right? And there are sometimes I make an exception where I'm just so confident. And honestly, that might be too cocky, right? That might go against the process. I'm going to keep reevaluating that because, again, I don't want to place all my chips in the player evaluation basket. I want to place my chips in the strategic basket, right? That's what I'm good at. I'm good at strategy. I'm good at game theory. I'm good at thinking through logical, rational decisions, right? I'm not the best QB evaluator you ever find. I'm not the best running back evaluator you ever find. I'm not the best wide receiver evaluator you'll ever find. I'm not even the best tight end person you'll ever find, right? But when I put together what I do know on the player eval side with the strategic opponent, that's where I think my competitive advantage is, right? And for Dynasty Fantasy Football, that's what it's all about. You got to find your own competitive advantage. But I think this is the most underutilized and unappreciated part is the strategic opponent. So it's a very underserved market. That's why I make a lot of videos on it, and that's where I think you guys can get an advantage in your league, right? Another really good example of this is quarterbacks being overvalued, right? So I said, right, in the offseason, before the offseason, I said at the end of last year, if you go back to my videos in the fall or my tweets, I said multiple times, I think quarterbacks this year will be overvalued by the market because we're not going to have a season like last year. And quarterback scoring is down across the board. If you guys listen to the latest JJ Zacharyson late round QB podcast, he talks about it. So the top 6 quarterback scoring is down, QB1 average scoring down by a full point or more. They're still very good and providing the advantage for sure, but they're not matching up to what they were at last year. So coming out of last year, I said, look, I think people are going to overvalue quarterbacks, right? And I'm going to take advantage of that. And what do you know? In this offseason, what did we see? 12, 10, 9, 10, 11, 12, sometimes 12 quarterbacks won in the first round. I went in drafts, there were 15 quarterbacks in the first 2 rounds alone, which is insane because we know there aren't that many game-changing quarterbacks, right? If there were that many game-changing quarterbacks, then there wouldn't be any game-changing quarterbacks. That's a lot of goddamn quarterbacks, like half the league, right? So, I saw Justin Fields, Trey Lance, right? These guys were going in the first round, right? And I didn't want to succumb to that full pivot, right? I knew quarterbacks were overvalued. I didn't know. I had a great feeling based on the data that quarterbacks were going to be overvalued this year. But I still ranked a lot of the elite guys in my first round, right? Now, I didn't have 10 quarterbacks in my first round. That's for damn sure. I didn't even have 5 quarterbacks in my top 5, which was a lock in every single draft you went, right? But I wasn't that far off, right? I had Justin Fields and Trey Lance towards that middle of the second round, end of the second round, beginning of the third, which was just out of the draft range, right? But if they fell there, I was comfortable taking them. So that's why I put them there. I had, Trevor Lawrence a little bit farther back. I had a lot of running backs high up. I had Christian McCaffrey, shout out to the God himself. I had Jonathan Taylor very, very high. I've had him high, for a long, long time. And I had DeAndre Swift, a little bit higher. So if you look at my first 2 rounds, the player composition isn't that different. I had a ton of quarterbacks up there. Even though I knew that quarterbacks were overvalued, I still had a ton of elite quarterbacks up there, right? But I just had it shifted around and mixed around a bit. But why? Why? You guys might be asking, Mike, why do you have quarterbacks that high still if you think they're all overvalued? Well, that just because I think that doesn't mean that the rest of the market thinks that. I didn't know how long it would take the market to adjust, and they still haven't adjusted, right? So to that credit, I wanted you guys to still be within that value range because quarterbacks were highly liquid, highly valuable, and very sought after. So the fact that, everyone else still had Patrick Mahomes and stuff as 1.01, I moved Patrick Mahomes 1.01, right? For a long time, I had Christian McCaffrey as 1.01. But I ended up moving Patrick Mahomes, like Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, and Justin Herbert. I think those were like the main guys that I moved up. And because I wanted to be more in line with the market, right? Because at the end of the day, trade value comes to the market. Like, not everyone's going to trade exactly how I think, right? And not everyone's going to trade exactly how you think. Not everyone's going to trade exactly how ADP thinks. But ADP is probably the most representative of what the group think is what the masses think, right? So you need to be within that value band in order to take advantage of what it has to offer. So if you want liquidity, if you want to be able to trade, right, that's why you don't want to be too far ahead of your skis, because one is the risk mitigation factor. If you're too far ahead of your skis, you have a lot of risk downside when you're trying to be first on a player you're high on. And on the contrary, you have a lot of opportunity costs if you're low on the player that everyone else likes, if you're too low, right? Because you're taking like way too little risk on the flip side. So on the one flip side, if you think a player is really high and you're ranking way ahead of the consensus, you're taking on a lot of risk with a lot of downside to their value. But on the flip side of that, if you're hating on a player and you rank him way below consensus, then if that player does hit, you just gave up all that opportunity cost for very, very little risk, because the lower your rank, the lower your opportunity cost, the lower risk you're taking on. So if you're taking on too little risk for that much reward, that's not good. But if you're taking on too much risk for too little reward, that's also not good. That's why you got to stay in the balance zone. That's why you got to operate within the sacred timeline. Within the sacred market timeline, right? You can weave and bob, whatever, between this, but you don't want to go like this. You don't want to go like that, right? You don't want to have big offshoots off of the sacred timeline, creating your own little stories, right? Creating your own little arcs, your own story arcs, and then eventually someone's have to clean it up, and it's going to be you, because you're going to be a shitter, right? So that's why I think this is the mentality that I've changed, and it takes a little bit of like swallowing your pride a little bit, right? Because everyone thinks they're the best evaluator. Everyone, we think about the hits, right? We don't think about as much about the misses. Why? Because people aren't going on Twitter talking about their misses all the time. They want to boast about how good they are, how accurate they are, how many hits they have. And so that's what you see. But what you don't see is like when they every time they tell like, oh, I was first to, so and so being the dynasty wide receiver one. Well, what you don't see behind that is like, 3-4 years ago they took a complete fucking whiff on whoever it was then that is no longer relevant, right? So that's why you got to manage your risk appetite, manage your reward profile of all your dynasty teams, and that's how I do it. That's why I have my ranks, because I feel like ranks aren't really done the right way on a normal basis, right? I'm not saying my way is the perfect way either. I'm still tinkering. I'm still adjusting. I think ranks are imperfect in themselves, but I think taking in market data is a great way to actually deal with that. And it doesn't just apply to ranks. I think really trade calculators and stuff should probably take into that account as well. If your trade calculator doesn't take into account any market data, then you're going to be very, very off base when it comes to things. So that's what I want to talk about this week. And I know it's a shorter video, but I think it's an important video and it's an important topic that I wanted to go over, right? So when it comes to quarterbacks this year, when it comes to running backs or wide receivers or whatever, now we're seeing like wide receivers, young wide receivers emerge, going in the first round, Jamar Chase. I'm not going to have Jamar Chase in the first round because I don't think any wide receiver deserves to be there, but I'm going to have him pretty close because I want you to operate within that band where if he does fall and he has some value, you're able to take advantage of it, right? Even though I've always said this, right? I don't think you should draft any wide receivers before the third round. I've held that view in Dynasty for a long time, and I basically never do, right? But I still will rank some in the second round. I still will rank some in the thing because I want the ranks to reflect some portion of market value, what you can basically trade that asset for, right? What you can redeem your assets for. I think that's very, very important, right? So if Jamar Chase is a first round pick by market standards, which he is right now, right? Because he's performing like an absolute fucking stud, and there's no denying that the talent and the generational prospect that he was, but I'm not going to rank him there, but I'm going to rank him pretty close, right? And that's what it all comes down to. You'll see a lot of young wide receivers, top wide receivers, my tier 1 wide receivers being ranked in that like mid-second roundish in my ranks, and that's why. It's because I don't want to be too deviant from the market. If I had it my way, I would put all wide receivers in the third round, but that's not realistic because not everyone views the world in my lens, and that's what everyone needs to understand. Like, not everyone views the world through your lens, so in order for you to capitalize on market trends and capitalize on market value, Like, you need to take that into account. And what I can't stand is, like, everyone's just on Twitter is like, oh, like, I think it's overvalued. I think QB2s are, like, overvalued. I think wide receiver 2s are overvalued, so I'm going to ignore them and put them way down my ranks. Like, that's fine, but, like, you're really only setting yourself up for failure, right? Because if you know they're overvalued by the market, here's the thing, like, in life, right? In life, I'm like a very long-term hodler, right? Because I'm never good at being first. I'm never good at timing the market, and there's just too much stuff going on. I feel like in Dynasty, I'm a little bit different. I take more risks, right? I take on more risks on some guys. I'm not saying I take on guys that have like a 1 month or season-long window, but I take on some risks sometimes because I feel like you can take advantage of those market trends. So if you know quarterbacks are overvalued, QB2s are overvalued, right? Then you should draft some of them and trade them into the market before that trend reverses, right? And it takes time in the Dynasty market for trends to reverse, right? Like, it takes time for people to catch up to trends, right? It took time for people to catch up to, wide receivers being ranked too highly before last year. It seems like we're back to that trend, but it takes time for people to adjust. So even though there is, I don't try and time the market too much in Dynasty, because if I see a good player, I'll just grab them and hold them. But there is time for you to take advantage of those market discrepancies and those market values in order to basically for you to capitalize on trades. So I'm more comfortable doing that. I'm not saying I'm a short-term guy in Dynasty, but I'd say I'm a much more volume-based trader in Dynasty than I am in real life. In real life, when I do investments, like, I just buy and hold for like years, right? But in Dynasty, a year is an eternity in Dynasty. Everyone talks about preaching patience and all that stuff. When it comes down to it, everyone's knee-jerk reacting to everything. So nobody's outside of the purview of that. So I think, it's important for everyone to realize that. All right. That's all I got for you guys this week. It's a short one, I know, but I do got to hop on a flight, but I felt like, this is a very important topic I want to go over, and just something that came to mind as I was going through the Twitterverse throughout this week. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure you go down below, hit the subscribe, hit the thumbs up, hit the notification so you guys can get notified for future videos like this. Follow me at Mike Me Up on Twitter. And then lastly, come check out the Patreon, man. Patreon.com/OurPack. This is the strategic center, your Dynasty command center for all things you need to know to dominate your leagues. Hop on over there. You get all my monthly ranks. They get refreshed every single month. Depending what tier you are, you can get my NFL players, or you can also get the Devy side as well. And they're all mixed in. They have composite ranks. They have positional ranks. They have all my tiers, and the tiers translate across position groups, which I think is pretty unique in the space to help you leverage how to deal with trades and stuff like that. So, all right, so just make sure you guys go on and take a look at that. It's the best money you ever spent in fantasy football. I promise you that. And then lastly, don't forget about our friendly partners over at Dynasty Nerds. If you guys don't know, Dynasty Nerds has a tool. It's called the Dynasty GM tool, which basically brings all your data in from like MFL, Sleeper, whatever, into one place. You can kind of like look at your teams, where you rank, are you a contender, are you not a contender. You can go through there and formulate trades, and you can manage your teams that way. For me, it's really helpful. I have like 30-something Dynasty teams, so I can kind of see it across the board, tab by tab, instead of going between different apps, different tabs, all that stuff. So it's incredibly helpful. But if you guys go on over there, use the promo code Wolfpack. That's promo code Wolfpack. You get 20% off all their products there, whether it's a Dynasty GM tool or just a Nerd Herb subscription. I've been a Nerd Herb subscriber for ever since I started playing fantasy football. I got my start over there. I worked for those guys for a bit, so I love Rich and Matt and Price and Jared and all those guys. So ton of respect for what they do. Big fan of their product, big fan of their work. So go on over there and check that out and use the promo code to save yourself some bucks. All right. So that's all I got for you guys this week. Until next week. Peace.